Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I have special guest Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow from the 0 Hour, which can be found. Tell people where it can be found, Richard.
It can be found at patreon.com/the 0 Hour, or this is the 0 Hour.com or Free Speech TV or anywhere subversives gather to congregate.
Speaking of subversives, now there's a lot of subversives, or you maybe call them progressives, running for Congress this year. And in Texas, we've showed you how the DCCC, now the DCCC is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Different, that's a DCCC. And so they're in charge with helping Democrats get elected to Congress. And they're not really supposed to take a position in primaries, right? Because the people decide in the primaries, and once the people have decided, that's when they're supposed to help a Democrat get elected. But they've been, of course, screwing over progressives left and right, like they screwed over Bernie Sanders, and it's not changed. It's only gotten worse. So we've showed you what they did with Stephen Jaffe. They screwed him out of his fair shot at getting the nomination. They've screwed over lots of people here in California. It's also happening in Texas. So the DCCC literally released, they did opposition research on a progressive named Laura Moser. She's running for Congress in the Texas 7th Congressional District. And she's the progressive, and she actually won a runoff. So there's going to be, she was in the top two, so there's going to be a runoff. So she's going to, which is good. But here is what the DCCC put out on her. So again, remember, this is the primary. This is the DCCC. This is right from their website. It said, Democratic voters need to hear that Laura Moser is not going to change Washington. She is a Washington insider who begrudgingly moved to Houston to run for Congress. In fact, she wrote in the Washingtonian magazine, I'd rather have my teeth pulled out without anesthesia than live in Texas. As of January 2018, she claimed Washington, D.C. to be her primary residence in order to get a tax break. And she has paid her husband's Washington, D.C. political consulting firm over $50,000 from campaign contributions, meaning one of every $6 raised has gone to her husband's D.C. company. So this is from the DCCC against their own candidate who actually won. And now gets to go to a runoff. So that's, you're not supposed to do that. That's the corporate Democrats screwing over a progressive.
And do you know the story behind this smear?
No, go ahead.
She actually, listeners in Texas will get what I'm about to say. She never said that she didn't want to live in Houston. She said she begrudgingly moved to Houston. That's a lie. Her comment, I'd rather have my teeth pulled out without anesthesia, was about the other side of the state. She grew up like in Texarkana, Paris,
right,
that part of the state. And she said, well, her family was from there. They were still out there. But, personally, she was saying, I don't want to live out there because there's nothing happening. So if you live in Houston, you know that you're not out in that western portion of the state. You know the difference. And people in Houston don't want to live out there either.
Right.
But they distort her words to make it sound like she hates the whole state of Texas, to make it sound like she didn't want to live in Houston. In other words, it's a lie and a smear. But the reason for it, a lot of people are saying, it was because she wrote an op-ed or something criticizing Ben Ray Lujan, who's the member of Congress who's the head of the DCCC, that this was payback because she criticized the way the DCCC does things.
So that's the kind of stuff they've been doing.
Right.
Which is horrible, right? That's the kind of stuff Republicans are supposed to do to us, not our own party.
They also have a rule at the DCCC. Well, first of all, they're the ones that have told candidates you should spend 4 hours on the phone every day calling big money donors.
Yes.
They are also the ones who said you should spend 70% of, this is one of their requirements for their support, spend 70% of everything you raise for media buys.
Yes.
Now, everybody knows now that street organizing people door to door, activism is what gets people elected, but their requirement is 70% for media buys, which, by the way, is where the big money is for the consultants that control the DCCC.
That's right. That's right. So it keeps their gravy train going with their consultants.
Right.
They want to mandate that you spend a certain amount of your money, which is most of it, on their consultants. And by the way, here's the consultants you get to pick from.
Right, exactly.
Right. So this kind of stuff ticked off Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders warns Democrats about meddling in primaries, right? So that's from NBC News, and he says, I am not a proponent of negative campaigning in general. I am certainly strongly opposed to the idea that the DCCC would actually do opposition research and negative campaigning against a very strong and qualified Democratic candidate. So that's what he said. My question was, are you really surprised, Bernie, that they're and why and they're not just doing it once or twice or 3 times or 4 times. They're doing it everywhere, all the time, any chance they get. They're still doing it. So my question now, you worked with Bernie, you know him a lot better than I do. My question is, does he really think he's going to change the Democratic Party?
I think he does. I think it's
really
definitely worth a try. I mean, they are not the powers, and I'm not speaking for Bernie. Obviously, I don't work for him anymore. But he's trying his best in Our Revolution, which is a group that he doesn't control, but comes out of the campaign. They're trying their best to take over control of the Democratic Party from the people who control it now. But so far, I don't find that from my observation, that the people who run the Democratic Party are, let's put it this way, are negotiating in good faith.
That's correct. So when you say it's worth a try, I agree. I agree with you 100% that it's worth a try to try to take over the Democratic Party. And I think Bernie tried harder than anybody when he came from nowhere to get 47% of the primary vote against the biggest behemoth of a political machine the history of the country's ever seen. And he did that. So that, to me, that was his big good try. They cheated him 100%, as Don in Brazil revealed. And that was our try. And so if my thing is like, now Bernie is sheepdogging people into a party that is actively working against progressives. I don't understand how he could do that in good conscience. And I want to get him on the show so I can ask him so he can make the case, and his people keep blowing us off, right?
I completely agree
because
with you,
they want to go on Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes and some more Chris Cuomo, but screw over progressive media. Once again, Bernie Sanders is doing that. So go ahead, Steph.
I completely agree with you. Just with the limited experience that I've had here in the state of California, that the corporate Democratic machine is alive and well. And that Go ahead.
Well, let me just, if I can interrupt for just a second, Richard. We took over the party. We took over the state. We have a supermajority in California. Do we have progressive legislation? Do we have single payer? It's the 6th biggest economy in the entire world. But somehow our Democratic leaders in the House, Democratic leaders in the Senate, and Jerry Brown, Democrat governor, they can't figure out a way to get that done. They're pro-fracking. They can't even get parity with drug prescription prices as the VFW. The veterans get. So this whole idea that somehow we're going to take over the party, it's just ridiculous in my estimation. Of course, we have to always support progressives no matter where they are. But Bernie's tried, and it failed. It failed because they're cheaters, and they're not ever going to not cheat, lie, and smear. And why do we only get 2 parties in this country anyway? Why are we only allowed to have 2 parties? Why is it I can't vote for my conscience when I go to the polls? Why?
Well, that's a whole other conversation. And look, I am a fight on all fronts kind of guy. Okay, so I'm for fighting to take over the Democratic Party. I'm fighting for I'll fight for an independent who's running on values I believe in. I'm for primarying every Democrat that doesn't stand for what I stand for, which is probably a majority of them at this point. So,
but do you see the Democratic Party rectifying any of the problems with the party that led to Trump? I do not.
Only in the face of a hostile takeover. And only if there's a hostile takeover of the party, as I call it. If there's a hostile takeover, it would have to change. But, look, this is not my particular war is not redirecting the Democratic Party or whatever. But the people who are doing that, the people on the Unity Commission, Nomiki Kunst and Larry Cohen and all those people, what they're doing is worth a shot, I think. Because there are only two outcomes I see, which is they're going to have some success, or everybody's going to know who we're dealing with. So, I think for a first try, Bernie did amazingly well. And I think that also, by the way, as a side note, the fact that everybody's complaining about WikiLeaks and saying, Russia did it, whether they did or not, has kind of taken away from the fact that when you read the emails, the Podesta and WikiLeaks emails, they did cheat. Okay, now all of a sudden we've changed the subject from the cheating to how we learned that they cheated, as if that makes the cheating irrelevant or you're somehow an enemy of the state if you point out that they did cheat. Well, they did cheat. And so now the only question is, how are these people going to do? Are they going to succeed or not succeed? But the one thing I feel passionately about, and this is where we're going to agree, is how dare you, as a Democrat, lecture voters for not supporting? How dare you? See, I'm old school. I've probably given you this rant before, but politics is a sales job. And if you don't make the sale, if they're not buying what you're selling, which is you, then the voters haven't failed. You've failed. You are a failure if you don't get elected. You are a failure if you lose to Donald Trump. You are a failure if you lose the Senate and the House and 2/3 of state legislatures and 2/3 of state governors. So you know what? You better sit down and ask yourself, why am I a failure? How can I not be a failure? If I can't be a failure, I better step aside and let someone who's not a failure take over. Because to me, that is the big cultural failing of the Democratic Party, is they refuse to acknowledge they've failed.
Wow, that is very well said. Very, very, very well said. Thank you for saying that. And
I feel better now.
Well, we actually have Nancy Pelosi coming right out saying that we're going to keep doing the same thing. We're not going to change. This is exactly how we're going to continue.
She was asked point blank on CBS News, on CBS Sunday Morning News, do you think the Democratic Party going to change? She said, no, I don't think people want change.
The Democratic Party is in a moment of questioning about its identity. You were reelected to lead the Democrats in the House. What do you tell Democrats who want a new direction and then go to you? What are you going to do differently?
Well, I don't think that people want a new direction. Our values unify us, and our values are about supporting America's working families.
She just lost to Donald Trump. She's been wiped out 1,000 seats statewide. And
yes, Jimmy, that they're not able to admit that they've made awful mistakes in light that we have President Trump. Like the whole idea that they lost to Trump. So that's what Russiagate is about, making sure no one examines the system that gave us Trump. Correct? Would you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. No, I think there's no doubt about it. Look, I think there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who would like to win, but it's not their first priority. Their first priority is keeping their jobs, keeping their positions, keeping their consulting gigs, keeping the circle, the sort of circle of life, the financial circle of Democratic life in whole and flowing smoothly for them. I think that is their primary goal. If they can win, great. If not, they're going to protect the circle.
I mean, how does a consultant maintain their position in the Democratic Party after Trump? You should be gone.
You should be gone. I agree with you.
Clear house.
So not only that, but the Democrats don't have a plan to replace Trump. Their plan is we're not Trump. That's their whole plan. In fact, so according to the same article, Bernie Sanders is heading to Texas and Arizona in coming days for a series of rallies, just like Hillary. And he took a swing through the Midwest last month, visiting Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan, just like Hillary. 3 states that voted for Barack Obama twice before switching to Trump in 2016. It is totally irresponsible that the Democratic Party has ignored half of the states in the country and given them over to right-wing leadership. That was according to Bernie Sanders. So there's Bernie Sanders out. He's doing a tour for Medicare for All. You know that stupid Unity tour he did with Tom Perez? That was supposed to be a Medicare for All tour, and he let them co-opt that into a Unity tour. And it hurt his numbers. So he's out there trying to get Medicare for All. He's out there going to red states to deliver a populist, progressive message. And Hillary went and saw Black Panther the other day and tweeted about it. So she's doing her part too.
Yeah, well, Hillary tweeting is a whole other thing, and Hillary's got a PAC too.
Yeah. She just started another PAC.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the Democrats, again, I'll make the case. The greatest way to change the Democratic Party is to have an opposition party to their left that actually polls above 5%. Because that's what, then they couldn't ignore you. Then everyone would know that the Democrats would have to reach out to that progressive party to win at the national level. And if they didn't do that, that was a clear sign that they weren't serious about winning. And when Hillary Clinton reached out to Tim Kaine as her vice presidential candidate instead of Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or Tulsi Gabbard or Nina Turner or somebody else that was a progressive, that was a clear sign that Hillary Clinton wasn't serious about winning. She was more serious about keeping the corporate status quo than she was about making sure they beat the Republicans. She was more about killing the progressive movement than it was about winning. And I'm not the first person to say that. Lots of people have said that the Democrats would rather lose to a Republican than win with a progressive. And that's what's going on. It's going on again. And I don't think you can deny the fact. But Richard, how could that be? You can get 20 progressive congressmen elected. It wouldn't do half as much. That's not going to do half as much as if you had the Green Party polling at 10%. If they were polling at 10%, that would change the dynamics of the national elections, would it not?
Well, I guess it would, but look, the problem is that, okay, here's the argument you get. And then I'll give you my counter argument to the argument. But the argument that you get is, well, they're going to pull votes from the Democrats, then the Democrats are going to lose, then the Republicans are going to win, then they're going to rewrite the laws so that nobody else can vote unless they're already a Republican. So, but here's my counter argument, and it applies whether you're backing a third-party candidate or a progressive, a left Democrat. The same argument holds, which is we know what they're going to do if the Green Party or any other left party gains strength, because they're doing it now. They're saying, Jill Stein, by eating a meal in the same room as Vladimir Putin, is an enemy of the state, but Hillary Clinton, by accepting a $500,000 check given to her husband for giving a speech at a Russian bank, is not an enemy of the state. They're going to do that kind of thing. My point is this, and demonize Jill Stein voters too, by the way, which is part of my last rant, the demonizing of Jill Stein voters. But what they're going to ignore, unless their feet gets held to the fire every time or unless they get replaced, is the fact that while they bitch and complain about Jill Stein voters, that that 1%. The fact is, what they needed to do to get those Jill Stein voters is the same thing they needed to do to get the black and brown voters who stayed home this time around. It's the same thing they needed to do to get some of those white working class voters who didn't vote for them this time around. It's the same thing to get those union voters. The agenda that they need, that they should run on if they really cared about winning, is a left agenda, because that's what the public wants. The polling shows it. So either, look, evolution is going to take care of this. Darwinian forces are going to take care of this one way or another. Either they're going to adapt or they're going to die off.
They're already dead. I mean, you consider losing to Donald Trump, you still have life in that body? They're wiped out in the Congress. They're wiped out at a state level. They're wiped out. And now they are going to make some gains back, only because it's an off-year election, not because they're brilliant campaigns or that because they have an agenda that the American people have signed on to. They have gotten almost worse since Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. They're not getting rid of superdelegates. They're going to hang on to at least 300 of them if they get it down that far. Right? They're screwing over progressives at every turn. I think it's time for progressives to just start a goddamn party already and make the Democrats come to them and negotiate with them when it's time for a national election. What the fuck is wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with. No one could ever tell me what's wrong with that. And then people say, well, if you vote for a third party, they don't have a chance to win. But what if they did? Well, then you could. So I can't vote for a third party unless a bunch of other people already are voting for a third party. Well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. And that makes about as much sense as keep voting for the lesser of two evil and stuff will get better. No, we get Trump. So it's all convoluted bullshit thinking. Make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for your support.